happy Hanukkah, everyone. Just waiting for. Oh, Efrat's already here. I'm very excited. Here we go. That was quick. So we are just connecting, and we'll get started.
Hey.
Hello. How are you? See, that
Hi.
was so
Okay, I did it.
easy.
Er, Yeah, because I have
I
no
know.
idea
Well,
how to do
I'm
this.
so excited
How
that you
are you?
have
How's it going?
Instagram. For anyone who hasn't met Efrat yet on
Absolutely.
Instagram,
Hi,
um,
everyone.
do you want
Yeah.
to kind of, while people are still coming on, do you want to give a little bit of background
Mhm.
of, yeah.
Of myself? Yeah, sure. Is that what you were going to ask? Okay, I cut you off. Yeah, so I am a licensed mental health counselor, LMHC. I work in Queens, New York. I have a private practice in Queens and Brooklyn. I also work in Brooklyn at SBH, um, and I am certified in emotion focused therapy, which is a modality primarily used for couples and families. I also use it with individuals as well, obviously tweaking it here and there. Um, I work with anxiety, depression, relationship issues, obviously, any adjustments, stressors, life transitions, trauma, and crisis intervention.
What?
So yeah, so excited to be doing
Me
this with you,
too.
Rebecca.
So
It's awesome. I want to actually commend you for taking this initiative and doing Project Proactive in the first place. I mean, like, seriously, this is like amazing, amazing stuff. And we are so lucky that you did this for the community. It was
oh yeah,
way necessary. And yeah, and like you took that initiative that I think was really necessary for so long.
thanks so much.
I think that mental health is like something that
Yeah.
everybody struggles with. Everyone has stressors, challenges in their life, and like there's no use pretending that we
I
don't,
know
you
we've gotten
know?
really good at pretending as
Um,
a community,
so,
but I think we have to get good at unpretending.
yeah, absolutely. I think that there's definitely a fear of being judged, which is super high, um, which I think contributes to the stigma that people are so scared of. Well, am I going to be judged? And I think this project is that you started is really to help people understand that there's
No,
no
I
shame,
know.
like there's nothing wrong with struggling. That's perfectly
Yeah.
human and normal.
Like, I
So
really don't
thank
think that I
you
know
for that.
anybody who doesn't struggle with mental health. And, like, and if they
Right,
don't,
absolutely.
then they're probably worse off than the people who do.
I totally agree, by the way. I think that anyway, any people who really are focusing on themselves internally and really aware of the struggles that they have are growth oriented people. And I think that that really um, contributes to the person that they become. And they're more likable. People like them, like for that, for their self awareness, for their ability to see themselves, face themselves. It takes so much courage. Um, and it's really true that everybody I know also really struggles with
Yeah.
different mental health stuff. Absolutely. So yeah. So should we start talking
Yeah, I
about
actually have a
marriage?
quick
Because
question before
I
we
don't.
start. So you said that
Yeah,
the EFT
absolutely.
is
Sure.
usually for couples and family.
And family.
So it's relationship focused.
Relation.
Okay. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
Relationship
And
focus.
but so
Absolutely.
could it be like
Yeah.
relationship with self? Like you could use that, like it's the same.
So it is well. It's hard. I combine a different modality with that. IFS is more relationship with self, internal family systems. That's more what I
Okay.
use for a relationship with self, just personally. With EFT, it's more like somebody could be coming individually and struggling with relationships outside that are not necessarily coming in the room. So, or a conflict. Are you
So you don't need to have the other person in the room to do
there?
EFT.
Yeah. No, you don't. It's harder work, but it's
Okay, so
possible.
let's hear all about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, yeah, sure, of course. Okay, so I want to start off by talking about attachment. I think that's a huge piece of EFT about and couples in general. So that word might be foreign to some people. Attachment is basically how somebody attaches emotionally to their parent as a child. So if someone here joining is a parent, they can notice how they are with their children or how they were growing up. If you're not a parent, that's also, you can look at yourself as a child and just think about if your parents were consistently there for you growing up, emotionally speaking, right? So as time goes on and as your childhood is progressing, obviously there are different challenges that come up in someone's life. And parents sometimes struggle with really meeting all of their children's needs, which is, I mean, normal, obviously. And we don't blame parents for this, right? I think that the understanding is parents are really trying their best, and parents really do what they know and what they grew up with. So it's a combination of so many factors. But the impact on the child is, do I feel safe, right? Do I feel safe? Do I trust my parent to be there for me consistently when I need them to be? And that creates security in a child. Okay, so that's one, that's secure attachment. Then there's anxious attachment when a child isn't sure. Is my parent there for me? Are they not there for me? Sometimes they're really, really upset and I have no idea why. Sometimes they are there for me and it's great. And it kind of creates this uncertainty where they're like, are you there? Are you not there? Do you care? Do you not care? Are you capable? Are you not capable? And as a child grows up, they kind of start trying to, they almost always, in almost every situation, try to seek reassurance from their parent again and again. So it creates this uncertainty where they need to seek that reassurance to feel safe, to feel secure. When the parent gives them reassurance, that creates security for them. Okay? And then there's another form of attachment, which is avoidant attachment. And that's when a parent kind of really does not give room for emotions in this situation. So it's more about when a child, let's say, is crying and the parent, this is a very classic example that I see all the time, when a child is crying and the parent's like, don't cry, or, oh, it's okay, you'll manage. As life goes on and a child is really seeking help and seeking comfort and support, a lot of times the parent kind of minimizes the emotional experience, and really tries to avoid emotions altogether, right? We don't talk about emotions in our family. That kind of creates this avoidance where emotions are not okay to express. And as a child grows up and becomes an adult, they learn to really push away emotions to handle situations. They never really feel safe expressing themselves emotionally. And there is a fourth form of attachment, which I'm not going to really talk about today. It's a little bit more complex. It's called disorganized attachment. It's more trauma focused, but just throwing that in there.
Do you want to just give
So the reason why I'm talking about,
a brief
yeah,
overview of it, even
I
if you're
could,
not going to
sure,
delve into it?
okay. Yeah, sure, no problem. So disorganized attachment is when a parent is abusive or
Okay.
neglectful of their child. And basically the child grows up with a whole host of like confusion, disorganized thinking, basically. It's very complex to really understand. They could be anxious, they could be avoidant, they're never really secure, they never really get reassurance. They come across as adults, they could almost, I don't like giving labels, whatever. It's hard to
Yeah, no,
really, I don't
don't worry
want to
about it.
label an adult that might, yeah. But either way, you get
So
the
would
picture,
you use
basically. The child is
like more
not
of
so
a
secure.
trauma
Yeah.
focused therapy for somebody who experienced those like that type of attachment?
So, so that makes sense. So yeah, definitely a combination of trauma focused and EFT, because if they're coming in um, for couples work, right, you need to do the EFT piece, right, to really address the relationship part of it. And a lot of times addressing the relationship can also be very healing
Okay.
for the trauma, which is something we're going to talk about later. Um, because I think even in situations where somebody grew up having anxious attachment or having avoidant attachment, they could also have endured, childhood traumas from parental figures in different ways. It doesn't only have to be with disorganized attachment where it's like physical or sexual abuse or neglect. It can be in other
Yeah, if anybody
areas as
wants
well.
to hear more about that, we have there's a live saved on our YouTube channel with Esther Goldstein, and there's also one with Bruchy Moskowitz that really talks about the trauma from that, like big T, little small T trauma.
So
Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about here, right? So big T would be like the real physical sexual abuse, and then there's also all the little T's that
which
happen
could
growing
be,
up in
if
childhood, right?
they're
Where you
not
feel
addressed, it could
neglected.
be just as significant at a certain point.
Oh, of course. Yeah, yeah. I mean, everyone is different. I think every experience can be different. Every person has a different amount of resilience. So it's hard to tell what would be little
Right.
for some people, big for others. But yeah, definitely can for sure become big as if it's not addressed, then it will definitely impact their life, put it that way. For sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, so I think that, so the point of understanding attachment here is that it's really very significant in terms of couples. And with couples, what EFT, emotion focused therapy, kind of suggests is that there's research behind this and everything. That attachment styles a child will have with their parent is how a person, an adult, will attach to their partner. Um, so if you think about, let's say, you have anxious attachment, let's just use one, okay? Let's just say I have anxious attachment. And so growing up, let's just say I have anxious attachment, that means that I will anxiously attach to my husband, right? That means as a child, I always needed to seek reassurance from my parent. So as an adult, I will always need to seek reassurance from my husband or something, or partner, or whatever, okay? So just to think about that for a second is pretty significant, right? It kind of is scary as a parent, right? The responsibility that you have for your children. But the good news is that what we call attachment injuries, they could be repaired, right? And so it's something that if we get nervous, oh no, right? Are we there for our children? Or, oh no, what if I have this attachment style, then I'm screwed? No, like that's not going to happen. There is a way of repairing it, and obviously couples counseling definitely addresses that. And I think working together with your partner, I think what EFT does is you use your partner to help repair the attachment injuries that you may have had as a child.
Can I ask you something?
So yeah,
if
absolutely.
you know, let's say a mother experienced some sort of loss where she was grieving when her child was a baby, so there was some sort of disruption in the attachment. So could the attachment injury be repaired when the child is younger, so it doesn't hit them later on?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, thank you for asking that. Sometimes I gloss over things that,
That's what
like,
I'm here
I'm so
for.
happy you asked that question. That is so important. That is so important, and I really appreciate you asking that. Yeah, so with that, as a parent, we're constantly repairing without even knowing that we're repairing, right? For example, we might yell at our child, which I think every parent does, right? Because that's just human. We're all going to yell sometimes. And and then that would potentially, depending on the situation, be almost always an attachment injury, right? Oh no, like mom is mad, right? Oh no, mom isn't happy with me. And then how do we repair it? Then we work through it, we process what happened, we go over to the child and we say, oh, I'm so sorry, mommy yelled, right? Mommy was frustrated, but really, it's nothing to do with you. And really process the experience with the child and validate the child and process that and really explain to the child what happened in a way that helps them get soothed, right? So we soothe that child, and that's already repairing that injury, and that's it. And then you move past it. So that's a much lighter example than the example you gave about a mother grieving on a different loss that might have impacted a child. But at the same time, it is possible the more a parent is there for their child, right, the more that repair is happening, even if it's not a particular example. So another thing that I think is really important to mention is that we're allowed to mess up, I think, 33% of the time to create security in our children.
That's a higher number. Sarafana Radcliffe uses the 80-20 rule.
Oh, really? Okay, so this is what I've heard in terms of like research from EFT. I don't know exactly what article says this, but what EFT says is that you can mess up 33% of the time.
I like those numbers better. Probably...
Yeah, and still create security in your child. Because we're allowed to be human, right? Like we're allowed to mess up. Every parent messes up, right? So let's turn the lens a little bit and focus more on the relationship as an adult, because I think that this is what people are joining for. So I want to make sure to have time for that. But that's a huge piece here in terms of like being allowed to mess up. I think it's really reassuring for me, for sure. So in terms of an adult, okay, so let's just understand that, okay, so we have this attachment style, we attach to our partner in a certain way, and don't forget, our partner has their own attachment style and their own childhood, and they're attaching to us a different way or the same way, right? I see so many different couples and they're all coming in kind of with different needs and wants and experiences based on their past most of the time, right? I think a really important point to bring up here in terms of the couple relationship is that having any sort of childhood trauma in a person's past will almost always impact their relationship with a partner. And I think that's a really crucial point to understand, because I think that I'm talking about like an extensive childhood trauma, not like a one-time thing, but I think it's really important to bring up just because I think people don't even understand how big this is.
Are you talking about small T's or big T's? Any T's.
Any T. I really think any T really impacts the couple's relationship, because what happens is that, the couple comes into a relationship and they have all these needs, all these wants, all these expectations, honestly, right? Most of the time they're not very realistic, but that's besides the point, right? And so they come in and they carry all of this baggage with them of all of the things that have hurt them in the past, of all of the experiences, painful, some happy, obviously, and some painful experiences. And I think that, when they're living with someone else and they're really having this close relationship, their partner might not even realize that they're triggering them by doing something that is seemingly innocuous, right? Because of their own past history. So usually what happens is that, okay, you have this childhood trauma. I'm going to give an example just to illustrate this, because I think it's really important to focus on how childhood traumas should be addressed and really are so important to go to therapy for and really process and have awareness around. And even if someone did therapy and did process all of this, I still think there will be triggers in their relationship. But it's about having the awareness of what those triggers are so that they can handle them effectively that will help their relationship.
So do you help people make lists?
Does that make sense? I'm just pausing. I think that's a really important point. What do you say?
So I always wondered, would it ever be helpful to kind of make lists of your triggers when, I keep a running list on your phone, and then kind of send it to your partner and say, by the way, these are my triggers.
Listen, you know what? That sounds like that sounds like a great idea. I think that every relationship works differently. I think that's a really awesome idea if the partner can receive that well, right? Not all partners are like, oh, thank you. Now I will be aware and I will know exactly what to do. A lot of partners won't be able to do that because they'll have a bunch of their own triggers just from that list, where they're going to say like, okay, that's your trigger, and then they're going to be triggered from your trigger. Does that make sense? So that, in theory, is a really awesome idea for somebody who has a really secure relationship and their partner can really handle that. A lot of the time, I think that a partner isn't always able to handle it, unless they really do this kind of work, right?
I guess that's
Where they're
your
really
job.
aware of how to be there for their partner. Mine or any
I'm saying,
other
like,
couple
you know,
counselor.
to get them to the point.
Yeah,
Or...
no, but yeah, I think it's so important. Anybody who's seeing that they're being triggered by their partner, you know, over and over, or having these things happen, conflict is inevitable, right? In a real relationship, let's just talk about that for a second. Sidebar. Conflict is going to happen in every relationship. And if you think to any relationship that you have, if it doesn't have a conflict, it's not a real relationship, right? Think about any relationship you have, a best friend, a friend, okay? A mother, a father, a sister, a brother, an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, right? And a partner, right? When you have a conflict, right, that means it's a real relationship because somebody cares, right? What you're doing, what you're saying, what you're thinking, right? They care. Having conflict, it
kind of
shows that they
easier not to
care,
care sometimes.
right?
Like, I sometimes, when I have, I can't say what I was just going to say. But sometimes, like, in certain relationships, you just wish that you don't care, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that is a coping mechanism, right? That a lot of people go to. It's more like what you're describing is very normal, and I think many people do this where they do care, and because they care so much, they tend to push it all away or wrap it all up, put it in a box, put it in a corner, and say, I'm not going to think about it because it's too painful, right? I wish I didn't care, but I do, right? So then there's like these two realities. I always do this with my clients. I have these two hands. I show them two realities, right? I care, but I don't want to care, but I care. So which one is it? And then there's this internal conflict
So which
going
one is
on
it?
where you're like, so basically you have to work through what the situation really is and understand, well, what is that need to care, right? Let's go towards that. Let's understand, okay, so there's something about this that you really care about and it's so painful. Let's process that
I'm
pain,
so curious.
right?
Can we, like, pretend
Let's
that we're,
understand
you
that
know, in
pain.
counseling and work that through? I guess not really, right? No,
If
because
you
that's,
want,
like, so cool. Like,
if you want.
I would love to hear a dialogue that you would be doing. Can you be both?
I could try. I mean, it's easier
Okay,
if
I'll
you
role
role
play.
play with me,
Ready?
but okay. Okay, this is not a real thing. This is just a role play. Okay. Yeah, so tell me more about the pain of wanting to not wanting of caring and not wanting to.
Shoot, how do I do this without, like, actually using a real thing?
Well, you could talk about pain. I mean, pain is such a general term. Is it going to be, are you thinking of a specific
No,
example?
I'm just
Is
trying
that
to
what's
think
happening?
of like, maybe we should just do, like, a common scenario. Like, let's say, um, a very common scenario would be, I guess, between a husband and wife, right?
Right.
And
Yeah, yeah. I think that
the toothpaste,
we could choose. I want to do something more real than
okay, no, I
something
have a good
more
one
light
because, like, I
because I
don't think
think it's more
my
painful.
husband would care if I use
Yeah.
this example. Um,
Okay. Okay.
so so I know it shouldn't bother me, and for years I told myself that it doesn't bother me that he, like, flips the toothpaste
Okay.
upside down so that, like, every time I open
Okay.
it, it's, like, spills all over the place. Right? And I like to have it
Okay.
upside
Okay.
out,
That is a really
right
good
side
example.
up, because
Mm-hmm.
um because
Because
so
no
that
one will spell.
I it might take a little bit more effort to squeeze the toothpaste out, but at least I'm not gonna waste toothpaste.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's not such a big example,
I hear.
but it.
Right. No, it's a good example. It's hard to use the two realities because, like, how much
I
do you really
really
care
care.
about toothpaste?
Let's
You know
pretend
what
I
I'm
like
saying?
really care.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
we
So,
fight about it all the time, but we don't.
okay.
But let's pretend that we fight about it all the time.
Okay. Okay. So we'll just pretend it's about toothpaste.
Hmm.
Okay. So,
I can
okay.
be
So let's do
passionate
this
about
for a minute.
anything. I'm good at that. I could be
You
passionate
could be
about
what?
anything. Yeah,
Okay.
it
Okay.
really bothers me.
Sure. So let's talk about you put this pain, right? You put this pain in a box somewhere and you pushed it away because it's just too hard to really open it up and to feel it, right? It's so painful that your husband is not meeting that need of
Hmm.
yours. You just want him to know and be there for you and understand that he should turn the toothpaste the other way, right? So tell me more about that pain. It sounds like there's this conflict going on between wanting him to care, but also not wanting to feel it at the same time.
Yeah, so I really don't want to be stressed because he's such a nice person. So, like, why would I care about something like it seems so dumb to care about something like that? But like every morning, it really bothers me. Like I start getting like heart palpitation. I don't really, but I start getting heart palpitations,
Mm-hmm.
and
It's a
yeah, and
trigger,
I can't
right?
even figure out why it will bother me so much because
Mm-hmm.
like it's just something so stupid.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about the needs that you have, right? I think that it's probably a little bit deeper, maybe,
I feel like if
than
anyone's tuning
toothpaste,
in
right?
right
I
now, they're
wonder
gonna be
if
like,
we could
"What are
connect
you
it.
guys talking about?"
I totally true, but it's all good. They missed the beginning. It's too
It's not
bad.
about the toothpaste.
Um, yes, it's not about the toothpaste. So no, I think that just to continue in the role play, if you want, I think that what I would try to understand is, okay, so then there's something here, right, about waking up every morning and facing this trigger every single morning, right? It's really a trigger, essentially. That's what it is. Seeing that your husband didn't think of you. Let's just put it that way. Okay? And we all go through this in our relationship, right? Where we expect this a concept or idea of something that is so important to us that our partner just has no clue. Or even if they do, they might just mess up like 100 times, which is so normal, by the way. So then we walk around thinking like, wow, they really don't care, right? Like I told them 100 times, and they still do it, and they don't care, right? And it really hurts. It really hurts. And so I think that's kind of where I would go here with you, right? Let's talk about the pain of feeling like, well, does he care? Does he care
I
about
mean,
this?
I'm pretty sure he does.
Yeah, yeah, I know, I know. I'm just,
No,
I'm just teasing you.
but like also I've
But
like so I've heard from people
so
who hold it inside. Like I've heard people like similar stories where they like
mhm.
hold it inside and then just like explode one day.
Okay, so let's talk about that because that's a
Hmm.
huge part of EFT. Um, I'm gonna cut out this role play
Yes,
for a
because
minute. Is
I'm
that
not doing
okay?
such a good job
Okay.
of it. But
No, you're doing amazing, but don't, I mean, a public role play when we're talking about real things is always just so hard. So you did amazing. That was
thanks.
amazing. And thank you for sharing
Yeah, no problem.
about your toothpaste.
If my husband's
Um,
watching right now, he's
yeah.
probably like
So
rolling.
listen, that's what he got when he married this amazing person
Hmm.
who's doing this initiative, right? I think we'll respect you for it. Okay, so let's talk about what happens in a relationship when we see our partner doing the same thing again and again, right? And like what we just talked about, and we just feel like, well, they clearly don't care, right? Um, so again, just to reiterate, I see there's a question about friendship relationships. So this can really be with every relationship. I'm just using the concept of a partner. I'm just gonna use the term husband and wife going forward just because it's easier for me than partner partner. I think it just gets confusing. But obviously there's different types of couple relationships, and not always is it husband and wife. So, um, so let's understand this idea of what a conflict looks like and what your needs are, right? So we talked about attachment needs. We talked about how they really affect the relationship, because how we attach to our parents is how we are going to attach to our partner. Okay, now let's take this a step further. Okay, so there's also roles that partners play in a relationship. Um, Generally, and this could change and vary over time, and different kind of things in the relationship could change. Your roles can change, but generally there's a role called pursuer and a role called withdrawer. And one partner, let's just assume the wife is the pursuer in this example, just to make it simple. So let's just say the wife is the pursuer, the husband is the withdrawer. And in that relationship, what a pursuer is someone who, the way they learned how to communicate is through pursuing. And there's different forms of pursuing. So there's pursuing with anger, there's pursuing with criticism, there's pursuing with yelling, and obviously there's also pursuing with love, compassion, and even just vulnerability, right? Just sharing of yourself, right, is a way of pursuing. Like, are you there for me, right? Do you care? Stuff like that. Okay, the withdrawer has learned in their life that withdrawing is safer than reaching out towards somebody. So if we go back to the attachment styles for a minute, the pursuer generally is someone who has anxious attachment because they're constantly seeking reassurance. They're going to keep pursuing and pursuing and pursuing. They need that reassurance, and they might do it in a way that looks like criticism, that looks like blame, that looks like yelling. They're just trying to seek reassurance, right? And they're just really saying, are you there for me? Are you there for me, right? Okay. Then the withdrawer typically is somebody who's learned that they've learned to be avoidant, right? They've grown up with kind of an avoidant attachment style, and they push away emotion. They don't express themselves. It's not safe. It never was safe. Whenever they tried to express emotion, it was shut down. So they've really learned that there's no point. Okay? And so in a cycle, I'm going to draw a picture just to make it
While you're
clear.
drawing,
I meant to bring a paper.
What would happen if there were two people that, yeah.
Two withdrawers? So that's a really hard couple to work with. It does happen. The most common is pursuer withdrawer. There are withdrawers, and those are usually, I mean, it's very hard. It's just a really hard couple to work with. Yeah, very lonely. I think also there's really not much of an emotional connection.
Is there a way to repair that?
So they're generally not the ones to come into couples counseling, right? They're the ones who avoid emotion. Why would they go to therapy, right? I generally do not see withdrawer. That's not very typical to come into a therapy office. But at the same time, it changes also based on experience. So let's say sexually, a man can be the withdrawer emotionally, but sexually be the pursuer. Whereas the woman could be the withdrawer sexually, but pursuer emotionally. It could really change based on different experiences in a couple's life. Yeah. So I'm going to draw this picture for the screen. I don't know if you can see it. Do you see this? Yeah. So this is the loop of the cycle, what we call the cycle. Okay, this is what it looks like. And the cycle is kind of what happens in every relationship. And again, this can happen across parent-child relationships, every relationship, but we're just going to look at the couple for now. And so the pursuer, here, I'll hold it up. The pursuer is on one side. The withdrawer is on this side, okay? And so the pursuer pursues, and let's just go down here. And what they're doing is they're triggering their partner over here, okay? And so they have all of this stuff, all this hurt and pain over here. But don't forget the withdrawer doesn't express emotion. So it comes back up, and what do? They pull away. Now, pulling away is exactly what triggers the pursuer, because it's just asking for reassurance, right? So what they're doing is they're trying to get reassurance, But instead of getting reassured, their partner is pulling away. So they get triggered. They generally don't express what triggers them down here. And so they keep pursuing because they still need the
So that's why
reassurance.
it's an infinity.
And so the loop goes on, right? Because the more the one person pursues, the more the other will withdraw. And so I'll give you a classic example, okay? A husband comes home after a long day of work, and his wife meets him at the door and says, "Oh, you forgot to buy the milk." And so, or like, why didn't you get that? I told you to get that, and why are you here? Something like that, right? So this just sounds like an overly, to some people it could be like, why are you, like he just had a long day, like why are you meeting him like that, right? But then there are those people who, if you dig down deep into that, right, it's not really about the milk and it's not really about forgetting whatever they forgot to bring home, right? It's something deeper than that. And the trigger is the underneath part, right, over there, might be, oh, he really doesn't care, right? Like I asked him 10 times not to forget and he forgot, right? The same example we go back to, right? Just like the toothpaste. And so then she comes out and doesn't share, oh, I really feel hurt, but she shares, oh my God, like you forgot, you forgot to buy the tomato sauce, right? Or whatever it was. And the husband is like, oh my God, here we go again, right? Because this probably isn't the first time that this is happening. So what does he do? He probably just says, oh, like, sorry, or something, just to like smooth it over. They usually avoid conflict, right? And then just says, I have a lot of work tonight. And then he just goes to his study and shuts the door and goes on his computer and is on his computer the rest of the night.
Pursuers, that could just that kind of thing could be really bad.
Right. So generally, right. Well, that would end up being a full blown out like a full, right, like attack, until one person pulls away, right? So that does happen, obviously, at times. Generally, what's the most common is pursuer, withdrawer, and then the withdrawer sometimes pursues when it becomes too much. So they basically imagine like a cup, okay? When their cup gets full to the top of holding all of it in, then they explode. It's just total explosion. Right, like what you were discussing before about people who hold it all in until it gets too much, right? Is that what you said? And so that's really what a withdrawer kind of looks like. So when couples come to me and they describe, I had a couple come once where she said, I've been through a trauma, right? What was her trauma? She said one thing that was like so innocuous. It must have been like the last straw, right? Which to her didn't make sense because she was like, I didn't say anything crazy. And he literally went into a rage and broke down the door and like threw whatever he was holding in his hand and on the floor or something like that. Really exploded, was so livid and angry. And she's like, what did I even do? Like, I don't understand. What did I do? And so this is so classic and it could be so terrifying, right, for some couples. I'm not talking about like physical abuse and anything like that. I am not condoning that. I'm just trying to understand when a withdrawer really reaches his limit and there's like this explosive anger, right, that comes out that could be so terrifying. It's like, I married a crazy person. Like, what is going on, right? And in reality, they're not really a crazy person, their limit, right? They've just been holding. They've been holding so much, right? Yeah. So now I want to use an example just to illustrate the cycle further, just so there's more of an understanding of what it's like. Okay, so let's. I'm trying to think of a good example. Let's just say. Okay, so I'm trying to think. I don't know if it should be a light example or a heavier example. What do you think, Rebecca?
I mean, doesn't matter.
Does it matter?
Maybe like something common, like something that anybody could relate to.
Okay, so let's just say, let's just say, I'm assuming that this wife is, let's say, a mother, okay? And she needs help with her children. And her husband is at work. And for some reason, like he always usually stays at work late, right? Because he has so much work to do. He might get home at 9, he might get home at
Well,
10.
Marv
Some
is
nights, some
usually
nights 8,
like
some nights
at
7.
bedtime.
Okay, so not
I'm
for
just
everybody.
kidding. Shop nurses that wake up
But
so
yeah,
late,
no, I
you
mean,
know.
so in an ideal situation, that would be nice. But generally, so okay, so let's just assume this husband is always working, and tonight, for some reason, her kids are just making her ballistic, right? And it's always been hard because she's always doing bath time and bedtime and supper time alone. Her husband always seems to be working. He just always seems to not be coming home. And she's lonely, right? And she's sad, and she just feels like she wants her husband. So one night, she calls her husband and she says, like, okay, you really have to come home. Like, Chaim is making me crazy, and Shmoli is literally off the walls, and Khani is like screaming, I need you. Like, you need to come home. And so then he says, I have too much work. Like, I can't. Okay, you're going to have to figure it out. You'll be fine, right? You'll manage, right? And so she just like keeps pursuing and maybe texts him 100 times or calls him 100 times. Eventually he just ignores, turns his phone on silent, ignores the phone until he comes home, right? And so what happens when he comes home? His wife has been pursuing him endlessly, right? Not realizing that the way she's pursuing him, right, might come across as blaming. I didn't make it sound blaming. Now I'm going back
No,
and
it
thinking
sounds like
about how I
something
said
that
it.
really could
I would
happen
assume,
to just about anybody. So,
right, right. I think that pursuers generally come across as very like, um, not always, but obviously it could just be a normal conversation, but a lot of times could be sounding very blaming. Like, you never come home. Why aren't you here? You know how
but
crazy it
even
is,
if
like
they're
that type,
not
right?
using blaming language, it could still come across as blaming, just tone of voice.
Right, tone of
Like,
voice also. Right.
I
No,
feel like
for sure.
I
Yeah,
mean, if
absolutely.
somebody has an aggressive tone, that even if they're really trying to
Mhm.
be kind and gentle, it could just come across as aggressive. That
As not, right, as
right.
not compassionate. So yeah, so exactly. No, it's true. I think I just used to not seeing that. I'm used to seeing
Right.
really more of the blaming um, in the beginning, at least, and then obviously as the work progresses, it kind of changes. Um, but okay, so then the husband has withdrawn basically. So the goal that the pursuer has started off trying to get completely backfired, right? Like, she's more lonely, she's more sad, she's more like upset, and she really feels like she probably has the worst husband in the world, right? I mean, hopefully she doesn't feel that way, but a lot of times, that feeling can happen where they're like,
Well,
they really just don't care.
rejection and
Um, yeah, rejection, loneliness is a big one. I think what it really, the most common thing that I've seen in across the board is the most vulnerable emotion, I guess, is, I don't know what to call it, but the most hurt emotion is feeling like their partner doesn't care. The pursuer just wants to feel that reassurance that their partner cares. Okay? And the withdrawer generally is someone who doesn't want to feel like a failure. That's generally what I've seen, and EFT also talks about this as well, where if the withdrawer could be a woman too. I just chose the example of husband and wife, but generally wants to feel like they're adequate, they're doing a good enough job, that they're good enough. So those are the themes you would see with a withdrawer, because they're always being faced with some sort of criticism from the pursuer, and they never really get that feeling that they're doing a good job. So okay, so now understanding the cycle in terms of pursuer withdrawer, I think that we understand the roles very well and we understand how they're communicated. I just want to separate the ways of expressing emotion in terms of two different levels or types of expressing emotion, I think is so important to clarify. So there's two types of emotions that people tend to express themselves with. One is secondary emotions, which is like the anger, the criticism, the blame, the yelling, even just being defensive. That's all kind of what I call up here, like the surface level. And these are the emotions we tend to express ourselves with, right? We don't walk around being vulnerable with people. It just doesn't feel so safe. Generally, people have most of the time shown us that they're not going to be there when we're vulnerable. So we tend to address things more from that surface level emotion. We might express frustration, annoyance, criticism, anything like that. And now there's another type of emotion called primary emotion. And primary emotions are more of the vulnerable emotions, right? Like what we just talked about, which is sadness, loneliness, feeling unlovable is a big one. Feeling like someone doesn't care, people don't care, feeling inadequate, feeling like a failure, feeling rejected, feeling disappointment, feeling even bad about ourselves, right? Has that primary emotion. And so in a relationship, we talked in the beginning, right, about how when someone's been through kind of trauma in their childhood, it's really brought into the marriage. And here it's so crucial to understand this, because what happens is that the primary emotion somebody is feeling based on a conflict that they had with their partner is not because of their partner, right? Their partner, like you said before, like, I know my husband cares, right? I know he cares about me. And at the same time, there's still this hurt, right? So where is it coming from, right? So I think we have to just go back and look at attachment for a minute and think about, okay, there have been experiences in our life which have taught us that people haven't always cared, right? People weren't always there for us, right? Whatever happened in our life has created experiences that built on each other to teach us, well, what's safe and what's not safe. And so we come into this relationship and we really have all these triggers that we might blame our partner for, but it's not even them. It's our own unmet needs that are coming up because they're kind of touching this button in us, and then it's coming up. But they don't even know they're touching the
we
button.
Don't know that.
Right? And then, right, or we don't know that, exactly. The hope is that we do, but a lot of times we don't, right? So we really have to understand how in a relationship where there's conflict, right, in the beginning we always see how the partner, the husband and wife are usually blaming each other, right? And it's so hard for them to take a step back and see, well, it's not really about them. It's about me not feeling good about myself. It's about me wanting to feel cared for. It's about me feeling lonely. It's not about my partner. They could be doing everything right, and maybe it wouldn't be enough, right? And a lot of times they're not doing everything right because they have their own triggers and what's right. You know what I mean? Like, there's no here. So that's something that's so important to understand in the conflicts that go on in terms of relationships. Okay, so do you have any questions on that, or? Okay, so I think something to really clarify in this specific conversation is that, yes, it's usually based on all of our unmet needs in our past, and what we're seeking from our partner is really what we have a void in us, and we're seeking to fill that void with our partner. However, for couples who've been married for a very long time, where there's been really extensive pain or trauma from the actual relationship, I would say that that's a little bit of a different scenario. It might have started from unmet needs, and it could also evolve into just having trauma within the relationship.
So it wouldn't be attachment.
And it's really important. So it is attachment trauma. I think that I want to give an example. Let me give an example because I think it would help illustrate. I think I'm talking about concepts like a lot, and it could get confusing. So let's just say Chani and Moshe are married. Okay, they just got married. Um, and I'm actually taking an example from someone else. I just wanted to say that, like, it's not my own example. This is an example I've heard from someone else, which I think just illustrates it really well, so I'm using it. Um, so Chani got married, let's say, and her attachment with her parent is not very healthy, right? There's this kind of maybe codependency, or maybe the mother is more like dependent on the daughter and she needs to always please her mother or something like that, right? And then the husband comes in with his own things of his own attachment needs that weren't met. And they just got married, they're totally in love, right? And he comes home, right, after work, and they're just in their newlywed stage, and she's on the phone with her mother, which her mother is really dependent on her, right? And so her mother is keeping her on the phone and saying, "Oh, tell me about this. Tell me what he's doing, and tell me everything. And you have to hear about your sibling who did X, Y, and Z, and you have to hear about this person and whatever." And Chani's like, "Mom, like, Moshe's coming home. Like, I really have to go." And the mother's just not hanging up. And of course, being in this dynamic, she's trying to please her mother. So she doesn't end up hanging up. And her husband walks in the door. And she just says, one second, honey, 1 second. And this person, Moshe, is really triggered by that 1 minute. His heart falls, right? And she didn't do anything. Totally innocuous, right? His heart falls, and he's just like she really, wow, like she doesn't care about me. She's still so connected to her mother, like, or he's so triggered by that because of his own unmet needs, whatever they might be, right? And so that is something that he held on to, let's say, and the more she did this 1 second, going in their marriage, let's just say it's 30 years later, and he never told her that going like this is a trigger for him. It created this distance, right, in the relationship where there's so much trauma that's just built on that one experience.
But even if
that's been multiplied.
Even if he told her, I feel like that's the kind of scenario that could build, even if they do communicate it. Like that.
So if they process it right away, then I would say that it probably wouldn't be as much of a traumatic experience for them, because they would process it together, they would express their emotions about it, they would understand what it's coming from, and they would be there for each other, so that if Chani does it again, first of all, she would try really hard not to do it, but if she does it again, right, she knows, oh, she's triggering her husband, and that she has to address it. And then they would repair it after each time, instead of it happening hundreds of thousands of times and not actually addressing it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying? So I heard that from someone else, and I thought that was a really great illustration of how in a relationship, partners can really be doing something so innocuous, and it could be a trigger for their wife or husband for so many years, and there's so much pain associated with the last 20 years of their marriage, regardless of their attachment.
I'm wondering,
right?
if somebody had the type of attachment style where they weren't safe expressing emotions, and so they didn't even acknowledge that, like, if Moshe didn't even acknowledge that it was a trigger for him, then
right, that's what I'm talking about.
Well, no, because like, I mean, there, in one case, he acknowledges that it's a trigger, but he doesn't feel safe in addressing it, right? But I'm saying, like, if he doesn't even,
so that's after 30 years. That's after 30 years, meaning it's not right away. In this particular example, Moshe hadn't said anything to his wife, and 30 years later, they're seeing a therapist, right? And this is when he brings it up.
But does he? But like, is it possible that he just like wouldn't even know that was triggering him?
Yeah, absolutely. So it might be that he doesn't even realize that that's a trigger and he just feels something. He's not sure what he feels because emotions are so far into
So
him.
how would
Right,
you
absolutely.
get him
And until
to understand that? What are you talking about? Somebody just asked what we're
what?
talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Attachment focused
Okay.
or attachment.
Yeah, EFT. We're talking about how a pursuer and withdrawer, if you were here for that
Oh, so
part,
if you just joined, then
basically,
maybe start
if you just,
over because
okay.
there's like a long.
It's built on
Yeah.
a lot of stuff.
Um,
Era,
it's a lot
eras.
about relationships.
Um, yeah, it's about relationships. So yeah, I think that what you're saying is really important. That a withdrawer doesn't always know how they
So
feel,
how would you pull them
right?
in?
Most of the time, okay. So what happens is that there's different stages of EFT, which I'm not going to get into all the stages just tonight, but really the beginning of the work in terms of just understanding the couple is about understanding their attachment styles, right? And really working with getting them to understand their own primary emotions. Generally, the pursuer is someone who's more in touch with that. So you just kind of start with the pursuer, start with having them express emotion. And the way you do that is by really validating what their actual present experience is. So if they're really angry, then you just stay with that and you say, like, wow, like, I'm sure that must have been really, really frustrating for you, right? I can't believe that he doesn't turn the toothpaste the right way. That's super frustrating. Absolutely. And so tell me more about that frustration, right? Tell me more about that. Is there anything else coming up? And then you kind of guess sometimes and say, like, well, I wonder if there's hurt here, right? Is there hurt? And they say either yes or no. And if they say yes, you go with that. If they say no, okay, well, what else? What could it be, right? If it's not hurt, then what is it? Sometimes it's, oh no, I'm just frustrated. Okay, so then you stay with that. You keep staying with that emotion and try to kind of work them into understanding their own primary emotions, because that's really how you want them to be communicating, right? So in a relationship, when there's conflict, the most effective way of communicating is communicating from that vulnerable place of saying, honey, like, I'm so hurt, right? Or this is really hard for me, or I'm so lonely, or I just want to feel like you care, right? Can you help me understand? Can you help me feel that?
It's probably really
Can you help
hard
me feel cared for?
for someone who isn't used to it, who was never really allowed to express themselves, to use that type of language.
Absolutely. It's really, really hard. It's hard for anyone, even if they are used to expressing themselves emotionally. Usually it's not the emotions that are vulnerable that people are used to. So even not just for the withdrawer, but for the pursuer as well, it's really hard, right? It's a lot safer to say, you
Mm-hmm.
screwed up, right? Than to say, right? Um, it's always really hard. It takes a lot of courage. It really does. And I think the scariest part of it all is that you know, you can be vulnerable and then your partner doesn't catch
Mm-hmm.
you and is mad at you and says, what do you mean you feel like I don't care? Look at all the things I do, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
you just feel even worse, right?
And
So that's part
misunderstood
of,
and
right, working. Yeah, that's part of the conflict, right? That's part of working it through. And then you kind of try to validate, if you're not getting the validation, right, then maybe you should be validating, right? I think that's a really important line, right? If you're not getting validation, then maybe start validating, right? Not always let me just define validation for a minute, just for people who don't always know what that means. I think that it could be often misconstrued. Validation is not agreeing, right? You're not saying, oh yeah, you're right, and I'm wrong, sorry, right? That's not validation. Validation is really just reflecting how the other person feels. So let's just say I told my husband, can you just help me feel cared for, right? I really don't feel like you care right now. And he says, what do you mean? Look at all the things I do, right? I take out the garbage, I take the kids to school in the morning, I go grocery shopping, whatever, right? And then you're like feeling worse and you're feeling less cared
Mm-hmm.
for, right? And what you could do is reflect how your husband is feeling and say, wow, like it sounds like you really don't feel appreciated right now. That must be really
That's a
frustrating
good
for you,
line. Mm-hmm.
you know? I know I say that. It must
Mm-hmm.
be really frustrating for you. So you pick out the emotion, and generally it's
Mm-hmm.
frustration, right? Um, and you reflect it back to them. You don't even have to agree with them. You could say, "Yeah, I know you do so much," right? You're reflecting what they're saying back to you, and then they're just getting soothed. Sometimes they just need that soothing before they could soothe you, right? Validation is something that is a really huge part of every couple relationship. I think the most important thing in any relationship is knowing how to validate somebody else. Um, having conflict is so normal, um, and it's more about how you work through the conflict that makes the relationship stronger. Something that I'd say all the time, which sounds funny, but I think is so true, is that conflict creates connection, right? It doesn't take away from connection, it creates connection. And the way that that happens is because when there's a conflict, both people are just fighting to feel like the other person cares because they care so much about their relationship. And so when you work through that conflict and you validate your partner and you help them express their primary emotions, and you express your primary emotions, and you really hold each other emotionally in that way, that is gonna make that bond so much stronger. There's so much security, there's so much safety in that conversation, right? Where you really feel held, but you also are holding your partner, right? It's not one way.
That sounds like a really it sounds like it would be very effective with couples. What if one of the people, like, what if one of the people in the couple doesn't buy into this? It could be very, like, is there a way that you could kind of, like, how would that work if it's a one way?
When you say not buy into it, what are you referring to?
Like,
Not buy into
not buying into the
validation, not buy
therapy,
into
not
sharing
buying
emotion,
into, you know,
not
yeah,
wanting
not
to go to
wanting to go to
therapy,
therapy.
basically.
Like, I feel like like the way that you just said it's such a bonding experience, and the connection seems to be going both ways. But I'm sure
Hmm.
on many occasions, it's only one person that's
Absolutely.
working on themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I mean when I say EFT with individuals is a lot harder. Because when I do see individuals struggling in their marriage and their husband might not even know they're in therapy, in many cases, or vice versa, right? Um, you know, it's more about teaching them how to find resources within themselves to get that soothing or that validation, because before they can then really be there for their partner, because it's going to be really impossible. It's going to be really impossible for somebody to completely be there for their partner when they're not being supported. It's just really, it's impossible unless someone's like superhuman and says that they could do that. I really doubt that that's possible. Um, so I think that with individuals who really their partner is not interested in doing any work in the marriage, it is possible to work on the relationship by changing yourself, because every family is
Mm-hmm.
like a system. And so when you change one aspect of the system, the whole system changes, right? So for example, right, usually when your husband comes home after a long day, you're telling him all the things that he needs to do and needs to take care of and all the things that are stressful, right? But then if you go to therapy and you learn more about yourself and how to manage that yourself, and you just are there to greet your husband at the door, let's say, and say, "Hi, honey, how's your day?" That's already a shift in the system.
That makes sense.
Right? That's already allowing him to have a breather and to say, wow, like, that's pretty nice. Like, she cares to hear about my day. There's just a shift that's always going to be happening the more that one person is doing work. And the hope is that the more one person can do the work, eventually the other person can meet them where they need to be met.
Hopeful.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that there's another piece of this that I don't know if we have time. What time is it? 10:06. Okay. There's one more thing I think that's important to address in relationships in general, which is when people are kind of codependent. So that word is not always known to everybody. What that means is when somebody is really only feeling secure because they're only feeling secure because of their partner. Meaning without their partner, there's no security. So there's almost this dependency where they need their partner to feel okay, and that could be very unhealthy, because that means that they're really demanding on their partner, in the sense where their partner shouldn't be that person, right? In a good relationship, it's two adults joining together and living a life together. Not two adults leaning on each other where one pulls away, the other one is going to fall, right? They both need to be adults so that if one pulls away, they're still going to stand.
Yeah.
Does that make
sense? You're not like two halves, you're two wholes.
You're two holes, exactly. I know it sounds funny because everyone says two halves. But no, yeah, you're two holes. That's a good analogy. I like that. I'm going to start saying it like that. Yeah, you're two holes. You're two holes. You're two whole people, and I think that a lot of times when there's trauma in the childhood of a person, then what can happen is they kind of lean towards their partner to heal all this other trauma, and then it creates this like leaning where like if you pull away, then it all comes back almost. So part of that, anybody who kind of sees themselves as really dependent on their husband for security or their wife on security, instead of just feeling secure alone and then living with their partner, that would be something that I think individual therapy would be able to address, in terms of processing all of that past stuff that are coming up and getting in the way. And it's not the partner's job to heal the other person's stuff. It obviously is it can be very healing to be in a relationship, and it does provide security, and I'm not minimizing that. I just think that it shouldn't be expected. It shouldn't be thought like, oh, well, they're supposed to do this for me. They're supposed to be my everything in terms of that.
I think that there's a lot of misconceptions that we learn about that. Like, either through Hollywood or through even like Torah, where you're like the two parts come together to complete each other.
Right. Well, we are two parts who come together. I think that is true. It's more about, okay, how do we understand each part? Is each part broken or is each part whole? Right. I think that, whatever, I'm sure what the Torah says is probably accurate, a more accurate description, of what's correct, but it's more about understanding,
the Torah doesn't use
like,
that kind of
okay,
language. It's a lot of interpretations.
What do you mean?
Like the Torah, I feel like often it's the interpretations that get skewed, not what the Torah actually says. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's what you mean. Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, I definitely hear what you're saying, that some interpretations could be
Mhm.
misconstrued, if that's what you mean. And I think it's important to really understand this concept of not being too I'm not saying not to be dependent on your partner. I think that, of course, you should be dependent on your partner, and your partner should be capable of being supportive. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about in a situation where there's almost like this fear that someone is living with, where they're thinking, well, what if something happens to my partner, right? I have nothing left, right? Stuff like that,
Or they can't
where
like
there's almost like this
self-soothe,
fear
like
of,
if they like.
right, they can't self-soothe. That's a good way of putting it. They need their partner to soothe them, right? Where they're seeing out in every single conflict, right? Their partner is to blame, and their partner needs to soothe them, and they're always right, and they're just hurting, and that's already like not, that's not in a situation where that would be like a, I would think that going to individual therapy would really help address that, because I think that that's something that in certain relationships, if it's a new relationship especially, then the other partner could be enabling that without realizing. And I think also carrying a very huge burden of this, they need to protect
Mhm.
their partner, right? It's a burden for them, and it just creates a very unhealthy imbalance. It's not balanced, right? It needs to be
Mhm.
balanced. So I
I
think that
like that.
that's so important to bring.
We had
Yeah,
two
yeah.
questions. Is validating repeating or
Mhm.
summarizing what they say?
Okay, that's a good question. So validation is either one, really, repeating or summarizing. But I think the point is finding what emotion figuring out that emotion that they're expressing with their statement, and repeating the statement with the emotion. So if someone says, like what I said before, like, what do you mean I do so much for you? Right? They're not expressing an emotion, but they sound just so frustrated, or they sound like they don't feel appreciated. Then you just repeat back to them what they say, like, oh, it sounds like you do so much. It must have been really frustrating, right? For you to think that I
Mhm.
don't appreciate you. And I appreciate you and whatever. Another piece on validation is it's so important to match the tone of the person, because it could sound super patronizing. And it's funny because as a therapist, so I tend to validate people in general in my personal life. And some family members of mine find it patronizing when I validate them. And so, which is, every therapist will tell you that this happens a lot of times with their family members. They're like, stop validating me. Um, but it's so important to match their tone. So if someone is super frustrated and you just sound so calm, and you're like, oh, that sounds so frustrating, they're like, okay, I don't need that. But if you say to them, like, oh my God, that's so annoying, and you're matching their tone, then it feels like more
We got
like,
that.
okay, you get
We
me.
got that
So
advice
it's
when
important to match the tone.
one of my kids was like more emotional than the other of our kids, and
Hmm.
I didn't really know like
Okay.
validating that kind of way. But basically, we were given the
Hmm.
advice that that you should go down to their level, and you should match their emotions. Like you should match their.
Hmm.
So I used to
The tone. Right.
like almost be in tears validating, and so my son would end
Right.
up like laughing at me.
That's so amazing of you that you did that.
I
That's
mean,
awesome.
I messed up probably at least 30% of the time, but
Well, you're good. You're still
oh,
in that. You're still in
33%
the
of the time. I
bracket.
have a
It's all
low
good.
UA,
Yeah.
33%. I could,
Hmm.
you know.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
I actually found that it kind of like broke the tension even.
It does. It really does. Yeah, I mean, he felt soothed, so he was laughing is an expression of emotion, right? So your son probably felt so soothed that he was able to
Interesting.
laugh, right? Um, instead of just still staying upset, right? Because he really felt reassured by you, right? And I think you'll find that when you do validate and you really are matching their tone and you almost start
Mhm.
understanding them more. It's so funny. It works, right? Because it's not just about going through the motions. It's not just about, okay, let me validate and then okay, like that's not what it's about, right? It's about really staying present and really trying to understand your partner, right? So that when they are coming to you and they are upset, right? Okay, really
Mhm.
stay curious and really wonder, okay, like, well, how are they feeling, right? And not just try to take away that emotion and say, like, oh, it's not a big deal, right? Or like, oh, you'll be fine. Don't stress, right? Nobody
And
wants
also,
to hear
if
that.
it's about
Um,
connection, then you kind of like patronizing them is not connecting. That's just being obnoxious, right? Like,
mhm.
if you
Yeah, yeah,
connecting is really trying to understand them.
yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I think that's a huge part of connection. There's a lot of C words that I like to use. Two of them are curiosity and compassion. So far we talked about validation. We talked about the emotions that you're supposed to be using to express yourself and also validate your partner. And I think along with that is having compassion and curiosity. So if you really, really care, right? Another C word, right? If you really care, if you really have compassion, and you really are curious, if you really stay curious and you are interested to hear, it will come across. And that will create the
Lots
connection,
of
right?
C's, yeah.
So many C words.
I feel like I feel
Mhm.
posts coming
Yeah,
on.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I should, right? Um, So yeah, conflict creates connection, compassion, curiosity, heals conflict, right? It's just so many easy
Hmm.
ways of remembering it. Um, and in a relationship when there's so much hurt coming up for you, it is really hard. I definitely am not negating that. It is really hard to set aside your own stuff and just try to have compassion and curiosity when it might mean that you're just hurting all alone, which is really hard to do. Um, so, you know, I do understand how it's hard for a lot of people, and I think that that's the work. Everyone talks about how marriage or relationships take work, and that's part of the work, that sometimes we do have to set aside ourselves and really just be there for the other person, which
Hmm.
is really hard to do. Yeah.
Um,
Do you
there
have any
was one more
questions? I
question,
think that
but I think we're probably
okay.
like way over time. Are we? I don't know what the
I
clock
think
is.
so. I don't even, yeah, it's
Um,
an hour and 15
but if it's a
minutes.
quick answer, somebody asked, does pursuer always have anxious attachment?
Does pursuer always have anxious attachment? Okay, so no, that's a really good question. A pursuer can have avoidant attachment. Um, it's a hard question to answer. I'm trying to think of an example where I can illustrate this. A pursuer can be avoidant of their own emotions, but still try to seek reassurance. Okay? So I know I did actually, it's funny that they're saying that I did make it sound like a pursuer has anxious attachment and a withdrawer has avoidant. I think that it could be either, and people also just fall into roles that are comfortable for them in terms of they've learned how to communicate. Um, but I think that somebody could be avoiding of their own emotions and push that hurt away, but still be expressing anger or criticism or yelling towards their partner to get reassurance, but still at the same time be pushing away all
Okay.
of that hurt and all of that emotion.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Do you have any book
Yeah.
recommendations?
Yes. Yes. So there's a book by Sue Johnson called Hold Me Tight, which is actually a really, really great way of really delving into what I talked about today and really understanding it on a deeper level. What I talked about was really just the surface of it all. And of course, if anybody has any questions, feel free to DM me and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have as best as I can. So Hold Me Tight by Sue Johnson. It's a green book on Amazon that you can get. Another one that she writes is called Love Sense, and that's also a really great read to understand this concept of relationships in general. I also would recommend, this is not necessarily based on what I talked about today, but I would also recommend just the classic timeless book of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
I never read that.
I think that.
Yeah, I should.
Really? So it's a little bit different because it does categorize men and women, and obviously you can't always do that. But I think it's just helpful in terms of normalizing a lot of the experiences. I think that's what it would be helpful for. Where you're like, okay, this is me, right? Okay, this is what I do. This is what happens. So I think that's also helpful. But do you have any books that you wanted to recommend on this? Or?
No, I mean, I'm in the middle of reading books, but I don't know if like everyone would like them. They're a little like textbooky.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So I actually haven't
Which
read
I love
books on, you know, attachment and that are, you know, that people would actually like. People might. You could DM me if you do like textbooky kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful to conceptualize things for some people, and some people are just like, I don't want that. So yeah, I hear.
Thank you so much,
Rebecca. This has been such an amazing experience.
I really appreciate it.
And such a great opportunity to share what I hope that this was helpful for people, and really would love to do this again anytime.
That would be awesome.
And just to end off on a note about the title, really there's every relationship has conflict, right? And sometimes there's shame about the conflict in a marriage. Every marriage has conflict, and that's what makes it a good marriage, okay? Just a reminder. That's what makes it a good marriage, because that means that both partners care.
The C word.
Right. The C word.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Happy
I really hope that this that this saves. We lost so many of them.
I know, really. Okay. I don't even know how that even hopefully, is it automatic?
Like hopefully,
does it save automatically?
I mean, usually it'll save for 24 hours. So hopefully, I'll be able to save it after that. But I hope it saves because it was really good, and it will be very helpful to lots of people.
Thank you.
And we will be in touch and hopefully schedule a sequel.
Yeah, that would be
Happy
awesome.
Hanukkah, by the way.
Okay. Yes, happy Hanukkah. I know. I meant to say that in the beginning, and then I just jumped right in. But I hope you're enjoying your holiday, and everyone else.
All right. Bye. Good night, everyone.
Take care.